This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Thursday, December 19th, 2019. My guest is Rich Woods of Neowin. Hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. I mean, you know, it's winter, it's gray and rainy, but podcasts always cheer me up. So yay to that.
Me too. I'm particularly excited about this.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of really cool stuff to talk about today. So for the listeners, hang tight. We're going to talk about phones. There's a lot of interesting little phone tidbits. But as you know, we live in a mobile world where sometimes you need a larger device to do work. And today we're going to talk laptops, two-in-ones, tablets, that kind of stuff. So that's why I have Rich on. And specifically, the two devices we're both testing right now, or you've been testing for a little longer than me, are the Surface Pro X from Microsoft. And we're also looking at an HP laptop, which we'll tell you about later.
Yeah, the Surface Pro X. So here's the thing. Remember how I told you I was particularly interested to hear what you think about this? Because I compared this to like an Intel Y series PC. And Intel Y series, right? That's the 5-watt dual core, very underpowered, but it's made for fanless and light PCs. And the thing is that they're not any cheaper though. They're just very underpowered. They're meant for portability. You are the only person that I know. Are you going to shame
me? Are you going to shame me about this?
No, I'm not shaming you,
Okay.
but that's why I really wanted to hear your opinion on the Surface Pro X, because you're used to using this type of very light, ultra portable PC. Because like if you have an Acer Swift 7 or something, you can install Adobe Premiere Pro on it, but you can't run it. It's almost useless. I don't know how it is on because you use a 12-inch MacBook. So I want to hear what you think between comparing the MacBook to the Surface Pro X.
Sure. Well, so, okay, my MacBook's a bit of a bad reference. It's the first generation of the 12-inch MacBook, like when they first came out.
Right.
So they updated the processor, I think, a year into it or 2 years into it or something. And so I don't know if that makes a difference. I hear from people that it's a little bit more zippy. Mine has always been a little sluggish. But I came from an 11-inch MacBook Air Core i7 of 2013 or 14.
Right.
So I had a 2-year-old MacBook Air 11 fully loaded, and I went to basically the top SKU of the 12-inch MacBook at the time. So I've got a 512 SSD, I've got 8 gigs of RAM. That gives you an idea where I'm at. And whatever that weird Intel chip that's in the MacBook 12, I don't know what it is. You probably know better. Like
it's the Core M. It's the Y series.
Yeah.
Which it's extremely low power, I think it's called. And then like a standard laptop would have a 15-watt U series processor, which is just, I think, called low power. So
just to be clear, for those of you who are not following because you haven't been listening to the podcast long, I've been using this laptop as my travel, like go-to trade show. Like basically when I'm going somewhere, I'm on the go. This is the laptop I have with me. And so from day one, the MacBook I felt a little slower than my 11-inch Core i7 Air, but it didn't feel too much slower. And I think the big deal here is think about web applications. So I'm in Firefox or Chrome. I don't use Safari. I know that Safari is way more optimized for the Mac OS in the sense of battery life, but I've never been a big fan, so I've always used either Firefox or Chrome. Usually Firefox, because Chrome is a huge hog. And I like Chrome a lot because my entire world is in Google. So, of course, sometimes it's nice to have it, you know.
And that's the tough thing with the Surface Pro X, I know.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So, all these roads lead to the Surface Pro X. So, the 12-inch MacBook, from day one, I felt like, okay, it's a little bit, but it was really hard to quantify. It wasn't really that the things were loading slower because there's a very fast SSD. In fact, I think the SSD in this is faster than the SSD in my 11 Air was. And over time, honestly, the performance of this MacBook has not degraded, but websites and applications are wanting more power, right? So I'm starting to feel the crunch a little bit now. But it's a testament to both the app developers and Apple that 5 years in, I'm still using this thing and it's still perfectly usable. There are a few tricks, right? There are a few tricks. So first of all, number one is I cannot run more than 10 tabs in each browser at the same time. So yeah, that's fine. That's manageable. 10 tabs is reasonable. Like I know that if I want to do heavy lifting, I go to my iMac, right? And I go open like 50 tabs and that's fine. So as long as I keep the number of tabs low, and Chrome, of course, is a hog. So of course I run Firefox primarily. And honestly, Firefox runs quite well on the MacBook. Video editing, I actually use, so, you know, unfortunately, like a few years back, I tried Premiere. I taught myself Premiere, and I tried and taught myself Final Cut. And so I decided on Final Cut because, yeah, so it's interesting because honestly, they both have their strengths and weaknesses, but my first video editing experience came using iMovie. So obviously very easy, but I find that Final Cut is actually much closer to iMovie in its kind of way of thinking and everything. Obviously, same company made it, right? I wouldn't be surprised that I know Apple acquired the company who made Final Cut, and then eventually, I'm sure they created iMovie using people that worked on Final Cut. So that's probably why. But the other problem I have with Premiere is that it's dog slow. Like if I render on my iMac 27-inch in Premiere versus rendering on my Mac 27-inch iMac with Final Cut, it's a night and day for me. I don't know why. I don't have the latest, to be clear, I don't have Creative Cloud. I'm using an old Creative Suite, like whatever the last version was of that. So it's probably not the most optimized version of Premiere. But anyway, the reality is I will not run these on my MacBook. I do run Final Cut every now and then on my MacBook, and it's actually okay. And caveat here, I don't shoot at 4K. I shoot at 1080p. So everything's 1080p, 1080p projects. Right. So 1080p, it can handle. 4K, it can still do it, but it starts to struggle. Rendering, though, is never the issue. Rendering is just time-consuming, but it doesn't bog down the computer in any way. It's just slow. So I tend to try to work on my iMac if I can. I have a Mac Mini as well that I use sometimes, and it's obviously a little better than the MacBook. But honestly, iMac is where I do all my heavy lifting for video. So if I have to, like, if I'm at a trade show and I do want to do a quick edit of video or something, I actually just use the MacBook 12 with, believe it or not, with iMovie. It just works for basic stuff. It's just fine. Sure. But I can use Final Cut on this 5-year-old MacBook 12, and I'm okay. So the problem is that it's hard when we talk about the Surface Pro X because I don't have Final Cut. I can try to install that old version of Premiere that I have, but then it's 32-bit Intel emulated, so I'm not even going to try to do that. I don't think that's a smart thing. So switching gears, that's my workflow, that's my environment. And to be honest, you know, with all of you listeners and the people, and you, Rich, know this already, I use Chromebooks a lot. Like, I don't just use my MacBook. If I'm reviewing another laptop, usually, and I travel, I take it with me as well, like in my second bag, like not the bag that's like my go-to where all my important stuff is. So I leave the MacBook in that. But if I have like in my hotel room and I want to do some anything, editing, whatever, obviously I can't do video editing on a Chromebook. But if I want to do some work, I generally leave a laptop in the hotel room, kind of permanently set up. And that's the one I use. And sometimes it's a Windows one, sometimes it's a Chromebook. So I don't just use Mac OS, just to be clear for the listener, the audience, the people who don't know. I think the people who listen to this show long enough know. And so, you know, I've been very intrigued since day one about ARM-based laptops. And it started with the Chromebooks, right? Like Samsung made an ARM-based, Exynos-based 12-inch, 11-inch, whatever it was, Chromebook like 5 years ago.
Right, there were a few.
Remember, like the very first really thin and light one that Sundar Pichai himself announced at a press event in San Francisco. I was still at Engadget then. It was like, so it's got to be 2012.
Those were exciting. And that was back when they were talking about LTE on Chromebooks too, which I don't think anyone's doing anymore.
And so we're now going to give you a history lesson, folks. And so, Rich, you can take it from there because you can talk us through the whole Qualcomm 835,
Windows
850. On ARM? Yeah, Windows on ARM. Go nuts.
So Windows on ARM was something that Qualcomm and Microsoft announced at Tech Summit in 2016. They didn't start actually shipping devices until 2017 at Tech Summit as well, which was the Snapdragon 835 devices. So those came from Asus, HP, and Lenovo. And they were, did you ever use any of those?
I never did get the 835, so I have no point of reference.
Awful.
I hear they were awful. Mostly
they were awful.
I remember being at this Qualcomm Snapdragon Summit the first year they did it, 2017. And they showed the Asus one and the HP one. And I was like, okay, the HP one's not what I want because I'm not a fan of tablets that have a fabric keyboard attachment like iPads.
Right.
I like Yoga 360 style 2-in-1s. And then the Asus was like, just looked like some, you know, generic, like, I don't know, reference design, you laptop. Know, that they're like, oh, let's recycle this Windows chassis. So like the early Chromebooks.
Well, they were all kind of recycled models. All of them had their Intel variants as well. So the second generation was the Snapdragon 850, which was based on the 845. And then last year at Tech Summit, they announced the Snapdragon 8CX chipset, which is meant to be on core with an Intel Core i5, and that was supposed to be it. So we don't have any of those devices yet. The Samsung Galaxy Book S is delayed right now. I believe it's coming in January or February. Also, Lenovo has something called Project Limitless, which is the first 5G ARM
Yeah, we saw that at Computex, right?
Yeah, they don't actually have a name for it, though. I think they're going to announce that at CES, I suspect. And then, of course, Microsoft has the Surface Pro X, which has what they're calling a custom chipset called the Microsoft SQ1. And really what the SQ1 is it's an overclocked 8CX.
Is there more differences like cache and RAM speed or something? I thought there was.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
The thing is, Microsoft doesn't publish a spec sheet for this chipset.
Of course not.
Right. So Qualcomm publishes spec sheets for all of their chipsets, so it would be very easy to put them side by side if Microsoft did, but they don't. So I've asked at least I'd say about 15 different people what the differences between these chipsets are, and I've gotten very few answers. The Microsoft guys say to ask Qualcomm, the Qualcomm guys say to ask Microsoft, and then everybody else says we're not saying. So the answer is I don't know.
So how does the 850 fit in there?
Yes, and that, by the way, that's a common misconception that I see all the time, which is that the people think that the 850 is based on the 855. No. It's not. It's based on the 845.
That's right.
And so that was when they announced the 8CX last year. That was meant to continue existing as a sort of mainstream mid-range type of chip, but it's gone now because this year at Tech Summit, they announced the Snapdragon 7C and 8C. The 8C replaces the 850 completely in that mainstream range, and the 7C is for entry level.
Right.
And I'm really excited about the 7C. I don't know about you.
Oh, the 7C is the one. Let's just rewinding a little bit. In case you're wondering about all this Qualcomm announcements, I had a podcast 2 episodes ago, episode 140, that's all about that. I actually had Alex Gatuzian of Qualcomm on the show. We talked at length about that. So rewind and check that out. So yeah, the chronology is a bunch of Chromebooks with ARM-based chips way back with that, and more Chromebooks since. And then this big push, Microsoft and Qualcomm getting together, trying to bring Windows 10 on ARM. But unlike Windows RT back in the day, we're talking about full-blown Windows 10 that can emulate 32-bit Intel apps.
Yes.
And this is the key you have to hear because you're going to continue hearing about this for a lot of the show. 32-bit Intel apps can be emulated, but not 64-bit apps, okay? And then
not yet.
Correct. And then if you want to run native apps, you need to recompile them for 64-bit ARM, of course, because these are 64-bit ARM chips. And so the succession has been the 835 special chip for like what they call AC PCs, always connected PCs. And then there's the 850, which was based on the 845, not to be confused with the 855, which is a mobile chip for phones. And then there was this 8CX, and then now there's the 8C and 7C chips. And of course, there's that little outlier, the custom-made offshoot of the 8CX made for the Surface Pro X, which we're going to talk about. So that's the landscape, and my experience, you're probably curious, is that I never got to play with the 835, but I got to play with the 850. I got to play with a Lenovo-based 850 laptop last year.
That was a good one.
And honestly, I didn't dislike it. It was fine. Even emulating was okay. It was sluggish. It was more sluggish than my MacBook at emulation, as expected. But it ran. Like, the thing is, you have to understand about emulation. It's not like you're clicking something and waiting 1,000. It's just slower. It just feels like you're like, gotta chill, gotta wait for it to do its thing, but it's not unusable by any stretch. But non-emulated, I installed the Firefox Nightly, which is recompiled for ARM64. This is a year ago when I got this Lenovo. And wow, I honestly felt it was about as snappy as my MacBook and very power efficient and has built-in LTE and all that and no fans. That's the big thing. So the big kind of talking points about that Qualcomm and Microsoft are pushing here are super long battery life, always connected because there's a 4G or 5G radio built into the system. Like you don't have to add the radio usually. There is also this always on, like so it can run stuff in the background when the lid is closed, kind of like our Macs already do. And I think Windows 10, some PCs do. I think they can pull their email while the laptop is sleeping. And then, of course, the instant on. And I'm not talking about like you open the lid 1,000, 2,000. I'm talking like you open the lid and it's literally like your phone, like you touch.
Just like your phone.
Yeah. And even the Mac on Intel, this MacBook, if I open the lid, it's very, very short, much shorter than a Windows 10, but it's still like you can still count to 1/1000, at least 1 second before it pops up. So that would be all gone. And I don't know if that's a big advantage. To me, the big advantage is connectivity, fanless, and long battery life.
Instant On is one of those things that just feels so underrated. It feels like something I would never care about until I actually had it, and I'm like, oh, this is good.
It is good.
Right? I just open the lid, and it's just on, like technology should be.
So basically, now we're at the stage where the HCX is got devices coming out, like the Samsung laptop, and then, of course, like offshoots of the HCX, like the Microsoft Surface Pro X, and we're going to get more, but more importantly, as you said, I'm super excited with 7C because the laptop they showed, and if you go to my YouTube channel, I'll link to it, there's a video of the three reference design made by Compal that they showed at the Snapdragon Summit this year, like earlier this month in December in Maui. And I did a video of the three of them, the 7C reference design, 8C reference design, 8CX reference design. And you can see they scale up in features and capabilities. But the 7Cs got me excited because the guy told me the price point of that thing would be $299. And we're talking about 4G connectivity, and it didn't look like rubbish. And I mean, it's a reference design, so it's made by Compal. It's never going to ship, right? But it gives you an idea what OEMs can hit. And I think the one I had in hand was 6 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs, and then 4G, right? Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, 4G LTE is not something that exists at that $300 price point. Like, that's a real value proposition. You know, when they announced always connected PCs and they kind of said it was coming to the premium tier, they said, all right, you have 4G LTE, and you kind of look at that and you go, well, I can get 4G LTE in an Intel PC. There are Intel PCs with great battery life. Yeah. You know, always on. That's a hard value proposition to push. At $300 with the Snapdragon 7C, that's very, very real. Adding connectivity like that, and thinner and lighter.
Yeah, and so the big thing that's slowing down the evolution of this ecosystem right now is the lack of 64-bit native ARM apps. Now, if you're a Windows developer out there, consider making your apps so that they will just cross-compile easily by setting a flag between ARM 64 and Intel 64. I would highly recommend, especially if you're an independent developer, you do that. It's very easy. Microsoft enables you to do that very easily in Visual Studio and the development tools. As an ex-video game developer who used Visual Studio and had to cross-compile video games for multiple platforms, multiple consoles, I wrote code that would run on PlayStation and Xbox and, like, back in the day, the Nintendo Wii. So, like, I know that it's possible to make code that just you flip a define hashtag and off you go, right? So try to code that way, because here's the problem we're having. Firefox is right now the only browser, it's in beta, that's 64-bit ARM. Chrome, there is supposedly some...
Firefox is not in beta on ARM. It's out.
Oh, it's out? Because I'm still downloading nightly. So if you download the actual real Firefox, like, you just don't have to worry about it. It's 64-bit now?
Oh, yeah. They announced Chromium and Firefox last year at Tech Summit, and Firefox was out in nightlies like 2-3 weeks later. So it was in nightlies by January. So it's in production now.
So, okay, so you just download Firefox and you're done. And Chrome, of course, we've seen builds out there. They exist, but there's no official, and it's also really hard to find them. Of course, you could build your own using the Chromium.
I'm not sure I've actually seen a build of Chrome.
Chromium is what I'm saying, right? Obviously,
right. Chromium we've seen. Edge Chromium.
Edge Chromium, of course.
But that's in beta and dev right now. So when Edge Chromium launches, it launches on January 15th. It's not going to have an ARM64 build in the stable channel. So that's probably going to be for the stable channel. That's probably going to be something like mid-February or early March.
Yeah. So at this point, basically, what I'm saying is, if you get one of these PCs, you're going to have to install Firefox as your browser. Chrome doesn't exist as a viable, like, you can just download and runs easily and works 64-bit ARM. And that's the problem. It's like, where is Google here? Like, why? Yeah. I think it's because of Chrome OS and Chromebooks, obviously. But it's annoying because typically they haven't really had any issues making Chrome available on pretty much anything. And then, of course, we have a Microsoft's Office suite that now exists as ARM64, which is good news. And that wasn't the case a year ago when I was using my 850, correct?
Oh, no. Microsoft's own stuff has always been pretty good in that area. Because remember, they also had Windows RT.
Yeah.
Office was compiled for that as well, but that was Office 2013 at the time.
Yeah.
So the only thing about Office is that certain parts of it are still compiled for Intel, pretty much to maintain compatibility with plugins.
Got it. Okay. So, but it runs much faster because of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I'm not an Office user, so I don't know. You probably use it more than I do.
I don't know. I often wonder how many people actually use Office that much these days. Like, all of my stuff happens in the browser.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like, so that's the other thing. You can always go to the browser for some of the apps that you know exist in the browser. But finally, the big outlier, like the big one that's holding me back a lot from really being productive on these, is Adobe with a Creative Cloud suite of apps. And the reason for that is, look, I know how to use Premiere, and I'm not like, I prefer Final Cut, mostly because I started with iMovie, but I can learn anything. I learned Premiere. I used it. I would switch to Premiere if I could run it on ARM64. I'll be honest with you. Right now, I would not switch, but I'm saying I would probably use one of those ARM-based Windows 10 PCs to not blink an eye at a trade show and fire up Premiere and do some editing if it was available to me. I'm pretty agnostic. Basically, it's like I have video editing to do. What tools do I have available? Well, I have my MacBook. It'll run iMovie for a small edit. It'll run Final Cut Pro for a big edit. And then if I had another laptop with me that was like Win 10 and I didn't have a super old version of Creative Suite Premiere, and so basically if I bought the subscription, I would use Creative Cloud Premiere. But I would actually be interested in possibly buying Creative Cloud at this point, because I'm also looking at getting Lightroom and Photoshop updated because my versions are old, to get it to run on everything. Because if I knew I could get it to run on everything, like on a Windows 10 Intel and a Windows 10 Qualcomm laptop, ARM laptop, I'd be like, okay, now I have a reason to spend that kind of money, right? So Adobe, if you're listening, there are edge case
Adobe is
people.
Committed.
I know, but where is it? It's been 2 years now.
I know.
There are people out there like me who are lightweight, super hardcore mobile people who want the lightest, thinnest, most connected PCs and don't necessarily concern ourselves too much with performance, that want to use Creative Cloud and don't want to have to compromise and necessarily go to an Intel-based machine.
I think a big part for Adobe is that Microsoft kind of legitimized the platform by making its own device. And I don't think Adobe was taking it as seriously as it might be now. It's still going to be a while because all of Creative Cloud there's a lot of legacy code in there, a lot of just old stuff, a lot of extension compatibility needs to be built in. What they're going to do first is something like Fresco, which is something I don't care about.
Yeah.
Photoshop Elements is another one that's in the Microsoft Store, and I can't wait for that to come. Just because that'll make life a little bit easier, but as far as the core Creative Cloud apps, I think it's going to be a little while. I asked them at Tech Summit, and pretty much all they could say was, we really can't make promises for someone else's products.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, the reality is, I'm excited. I want Adobe on board. I'm not mad at them. I'm just saying, I would like to see a little more traction. So if somebody's listening there's an audience out there that cares and wants this, and you're maybe leaving money on the table here, right? Just think about that. So let's talk specifically about the Surface Pro X. What do you like the most about it? What don't you like? And I'll tell you what I like the most and what I don't like after.
Well, what I like the most about it is just what I love about all Windows on ARM PCs, the cellular connectivity. It's thin and light, and what I love about that one the most is just that for a Windows on ARM PC, it's the fastest.
It is super fast Windows on ARM. I was talking to Bernie at Qualcomm, who's one of the folks on the PR team about this, and I was like, dude, if you run the Firefox, I'm running the nightlies because I didn't know I could just run the regular one, but if you're running Firefox on this thing, it screams. It feels like last year that Lenovo didn't feel necessarily much faster than my MacBook, or about the same running Firefox. Just fine, basically, as long as I didn't have too many tabs. This year, I feel that the Surface Pro X might be about 20% faster. It's just snappier running Firefox on ARM with ARM64 than running Firefox native on my MacBook 12-inch that's 5 years old. Now you're going to say you're comparing a 5-year-old Intel, Miriam, with a crappy M chip to a Snapdragon brand new, Qualcomm's Microsoft special chip. And yes, but the reality is that it takes time to get to your destination. And sometimes the journey is the most fun part. And I'm really enjoying this journey, okay? Like people who are like using Core i7, i9, like gaming PCs or like super like heavy duty workstations because they do 4K editing video and Premiere are laughing at me, or both of us right now, about, oh, we're excited about finally it runs well on ARM Windows 10. Well, but we got to get there somehow, guys. Like eventually.
Performance and premium are not the same thing.
Exactly.
If the best performance was all that mattered, everybody'd be walking around with these 6-pound dedicated GPU Core i9 45-watt processor machines, and that's not what everybody wants.
No, to me, I draw the line that if it requires a custom power supply that's more than 100-watt USB Type-C power delivery, I'm done. Yes. I walk away. At this point, it's like I put my fingers together like a cross, and I go, go away, you evil heathens! I do not want to touch you, because I'm sick and tired of having to compromise on portability. I can do with weight and size a little bit because I'm pretty, big person and I can handle the weight. But I'm just like more annoyed when I have to like carry custom chargers and things like USB-C.
That's annoying.
I started USB-C when I got my OnePlus 2 review unit, and I haven't looked back. And this predates my MacBook 12-inch. So I've been in the USB-C realm forever, and I basically don't even look at what charger I plug my computers in. Like my Microsoft Surface Pro, I have not unpacked the charger that comes with it. I've just plugged it into my Huawei 65-watt charger, and I charged it when I first got it. Ditto the HP laptop we're about to talk about. I didn't pull out the AC adapter for that. It's a USB-C adapter, but I don't need it. I have like 3 or 4 65-watt chargers out there. That's PD. That's the magic of it. Like my MacBook charger will charge my Huawei laptop, will charge my Surface Pro X. It's just, I can't compromise on that. So for me, what I like about it, you cannot believe how thin this thing is by seeing pictures of it. You have to hold it without the case. It is something like what, 6 millimeters, 5 millimeters? What the hell thin? It's like, I'm surprised that Lou at Unbox Therapy hasn't tried to bend it and crack it in half yet. Because it looks like you would crack it in half if you bent it hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not fragile feeling. It feels really, really well made. It's a magnesium and aluminum, right?
No, it's just aluminum.
It's just aluminum? Wow, for aluminum, it feels really hard. Like, it feels much harder than regular aluminum.
Yeah, Microsoft usually uses magnesium in its products. Like the Surface Pro 7 is magnesium, and that's why they both weigh the same, even though this one is much thinner. They both weigh 1.7 pounds.
Yeah, so the thing that I like is it's thin and really very little bezel overall. I mean, comparatively.
Yes.
It's not as bezel-less as like an iPad Pro, but again, this is a full PC. And I already hear the pitchforks out there. There are people like, Miriam, iPad Pro is the shit. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is, but not for me, okay? Like, I understand that some of you out there, to me, it is a legitimate computer, yes. It's more and more, but I'm not quite there yet in terms of especially replacing macOS. I just want you all to know that I hear you. I'm not dismissing the iPad Pro as a viable tool. I'm just saying that for me, it's not right. So anyway, it doesn't have quite as little bezels as the iPad Pro, but it's pretty impressive. Super light, super thin. I am a little disappointed, though, I have to say, Rich, that when I put the keyboard that I have the keyboard without the pen, like the basic keyboard. Right. It adds a lot of weight. All of a sudden, it's heavier than my MacBook 12-inch.
Oh, really? It's that heavy?
Yeah, it's amazing. And also, it adds 4 millimeters of thickness. So now it's a centimeter thick. Now, don't get me wrong. The keyboard cover is beautiful.
It's also necessary.
It's absolutely, and that's the thing. It's beautiful. The key feel is really good to travel. The trackpad feels really nice. But when you realize it's necessary, this brings me back to my argument. This is my personal argument. This is not about the Surface Pro X. There are people who are looking for a device like the iPad where the keyboard is separate and you have to buy it and you clunk it on there and you carry it if you need it. Maybe use a pen all the time instead. I get that. But for me, I need the keyboard so much that I might as well be integrated. I might as well have a keyboard deck. And that's why I like the 360 hinge type design. Because here's the thing, like if it was with the keyboard close to or maybe just a little heavier than my MacBook 12-inch, I'd be like, okay, cool. I mean, you get a bigger screen real estate, so I'm in.
Yeah, I also like that convertible hinge design.
I prefer
something
it.
like the Samsung Galaxy Book S.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. I mean, as soon as you add the cover, it gets pretty heavy. Now, of course, 4G connectivity is built in. I haven't had a chance to test it yet, but I have a Verizon SIM I'm going to pop in there. Hopefully it just works. And it's kind of the way you want a computer to be. You want to open it wherever you are. It connects to whatever it is, and you don't have to concern yourself with what it is. And then you can start working. And for me, that requires a keyboard. So in this case, I'm a little disappointed about the way. But honestly, everything about it, the industrial design, I mean, the entire Surface line has been exquisite in terms of design for years now. Microsoft knows what they're doing, and it shows. But more importantly, this thing is the lightest, thinnest, most sexy-looking Surface we've ever seen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Surface Pro Intel lineup really hasn't changed that much since the Pro 3. It still has pretty large bezels. It's still, I think the screen is 12.3 inches. This one's 13. So yeah, this is definitely the best looking Surface. I'm surprised they didn't do different colors, which they've always done in every Surface in the past. They redesigned the keyboard for this, which is I actually love the pen garage in the keyboard.
Yeah. That I don't have that keyboard, but there is that keyboard that's a flat keyboard. It looks like a carpenter's pencil that you can get, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, just the recharge. I've never been a big fan of how pen storage is handled on a lot of different PCs. Like, you have the most Surfaces attached with a magnet on the side, and you put that in your bag and the pen falls off and it's sitting at the bottom of your bag. Or there's a pen loop, or there's a bunch of different ways, and storing it in the keyboard like that is really smart, and it recharges while it's in there.
Yeah. So they didn't send me any of the pens at all, so I have no pen experience on my Surface Pro X, which sucks. I'm like, come on, like,
it does suck.
This is what, like, why didn't you send me the pen as well? So, and of course it doesn't come with it. So that's the other thing. Microsoft always expects you to pay more for the keyboard and pen. I wish there was some sort of bundle where you get a discount if you buy all three or something. It'd be cool. But
also, like I said, I wish they had different color keyboards. This is the first time they haven't had different colors.
At least the keyboards, right? I mean, the machine itself, we get it. On a note about the finish and the quality of the materials and all that, it's really great. But it is a fingerprint magnet. Holy crap! Like that.
It sure is.
I believe I did my unboxing. I don't have particularly oily hands. It was dry in my house. I wasn't sweating, and I did the unboxing. I looked at the back of the thing, and I was like, ugh. You little devil, you. I mean, it's just like, I'm nitpicking here, but look, the reality is this is my best ACPC Qualcomm based. I hate to say this because it's Microsoft's chip, but whatever. We know it's Qualcomm HCX on steroids based experience, and I have to say I'm very impressed. Look, folks, if you don't want to get a Chromebook because you're worried that at some point you might need a real OS, like a real local storage, native apps, not native apps, but local apps kind of experience, I would say if you only have to have that local experience very, very seldom, consider getting one of those Qualcomm-based laptops, because the battery life, the connectivity, the lightness, all that good stuff really, really pays off. And you can still, with Windows 10, emulated run these old 32-bit apps. So perhaps you have an old version of Photoshop like I do that's 32-bit that you can run. And then, boom, it's not going to be fast, but you can make that quick edit on that PSD you have floating around that you just happen to have because you've been working on Creative Suite forever, right? That's the kind of thing that a Chromebook doesn't let you do that I think Windows on ARM just enables, which I think is phenomenal.
And 64-bit emulation is coming eventually.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if they're even going to bother. You know what I'm saying? Like, should they even bother at this point?
Should they? No. I mean, because the performance will be worse than 32-bit emulation. I feel like they missed a beat by not introducing a new premium PC chipset this year, because Intel's new Ice Lake processors, they're legit. The only ones that have been released so far are the U-series ones, the 15-watt ones, and that's like that Dell XPS 13 2-in-1 that we were talking about that came out of Computex. But they also have Ice Lake Y, and these things, just looking at the spec sheet, they're much better than the low-powered ones that we were talking about earlier in the show. These things are quad-core now instead of dual-core. They have Iris Plus graphics. They have a higher TDP. So they could, like, in that ultra-portable fanless space, they could... They could be really interesting this year. I'm really curious to see if devices get announced.
I'm not discounting Intel. I'm just saying that there is room for an ARM-based Windows 10 world. And I'm glad to see that Microsoft worked with Qualcomm to show what can be done. Here's, if Microsoft, if you're listening, here's what I would like. In the same way as you took the general basic design of the Surface Pro and turned it into an ARM device with Surface Pro X, please take the experience of the Surface laptop, the 13-inch, make it thinner and lighter, less bezel, and give us a bona fide Surface Laptop X. That's what I want. With yeah, are you drooling yet? That's exactly what I want. I will pay. Absolutely, I am not kidding you. I will pay $1,000, $1,200, even as much as $1,500 if it's the right specs and the right screen and everything else. I mean, basically, it is going to be the right screen because the Surface laptop is an incredibly beautiful screen. So my point is, I love the Surface laptops and I love what you're doing with ARM. Hint, hint, hint. Consider your next step. But it has to be thin and light and really sexy because there's a lot of thin and light sexy laptops out there. And speaking of, I want to kind of transition quickly maybe to the HP.
Yep.
So we've been teasing about this HP laptop that we both have. I have just literally unboxed it. I have no seat time with it, but I can tell you a little bit because I got briefed. And you, Rich, have played with yours. So
how's the fingerprint situation on that one, by the way?
Again, I haven't set it up yet. I don't know.
Oh.
So
see, I thought you were going to transition when you said the Pro X was a fingerprint magnet because this one is not.
So not at all. Yeah. So I have a bluish one. So let's talk about what it is. It's the HP Elite Dragonfly. And just so you understand where we're going with this, why we've picked this to discuss, because we both have it, and I don't always have a lot of the laptops that Rich has. But more importantly, this thing is really interesting because it's an enterprise, like a corporate business laptop. It's for IT. You know, it's to be deployed by IT people for medium to large businesses. It's not the kind of laptop you would go to, Best Buy or Amazon or whatever to buy, right? Like, so, but it is an ultralight, ultra thin 13-inch that's sexy, and this does not happen with business enterprise laptops, right? So
typically HP's business laptops are just that standard silver aluminum color.
Exactly. So I was like intrigued, and I said, "Hey, can I get a review in it?" And you got a review in it, and again, I literally got it yesterday, so I just unboxed it. I haven't set it up. That's something to do today for me. But yes, you're right. My first thoughts was, completely not a fingerprint magnet. It is machined magnesium, which is kind of insane because usually magnesium is cast.
Malted.
And then here's what's got me really tickled about this thing. It is so effing light. Like, here's what I'm talking about. Like, it is lighter than my MacBook 12, which is super light. And it's definitely lighter than...
Well, which one did they send you?
I don't know.
Oh. Well, see, there's two. There's the one with the 2-cell battery. And there's one with a 4-cell battery.
How do you know?
I'm not sure because they just told me.
Is it a thickness difference?
I don't think so, but the weight is different. If you have the 2-cell battery, it's 2.18 pounds, which is wild for a 13-inch convertible.
I mean,
the 4-cell battery, which is what they sent to most reviewers, I think, it's 2.5 pounds, which is still crazy.
I honestly think it's the dual cell because it feels about the same weight as my MacBook, which is about that weight. So it feels light. And my whole point I was going to make is that we were talking about the Surface Pro X earlier, and I felt that with the keyboard it was heavy. It's night and day. It's really heavy with the keyboard compared to this Elite Dragonfly thing. And so again, this Elite Dragonfly is a convertible. It's like got that 360 hinge. It's got a pen. It comes with a pen in the box. And this is where I'm like, Microsoft, like, can you please play in that league? Because that's what we really want. How about a Surface laptop that is a convertible instead of a Surface, Pro where you have to clunk the keyboard on? Because when I'm typing on my lap, which I am a lot, I like sitting. I have this beautiful armchair that I just like to sit in and work. Headphones on, focused, and I can't use these devices like an iPad or Surface Pro device because they literally will not stay on my lap for very long.
Yeah, it's tough. So it's not optimal.
So basically, can we get that form factor of that Elite Dragonfly with the guts of an ARM-based Surface laptop? That's kind of what I want. So somebody's going to make that. I guess maybe Samsung is making that with that new Galaxy ARM-based 8CX, whatever it's called.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the same thing like with that Lenovo, the one you said.
Yeah,
the
whatever. Actually, it's interesting about that Lenovo. That chassis exists as a Chromebook, as a Windows 10 Intel, and as a Windows 10 850 Snapdragon base, which is like, what? Anyway, that's typical of big laptop companies, though. But this Elite Dragonfly, dude, for a business laptop, I'm blown away by the design and the attention to detail. The ports on this are cool. You have a USB-A on one side. You have a full-size HDMI on the other side. You have 2 USB-Cs. You have a headphone jack. You have a Kensington lock if you care about that. But I'm saying, like, this does not sacrifice any thickness, or like it doesn't compromise the sexiness of the thing. So it's very clear that it's possible to make a laptop today that has these ports without making compromises. And you're right, that bluish finish I have is just gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Let me tell you, I love HP's Elite books. And a couple things, which I don't think is probably not in your review unit either, but they have the SureView display.
Oh, right. Yeah. For privacy.
So that's so they talk about visual hacking, which is when someone's just kind of looking over your shoulder at what you're working on. They could steal your information. So you hit a button on the keyboard, and then the screen just goes dark if you're looking at it from an angle. It's super cool. So it's SureView Gen 3. Gen 2, the screen actually looked white if you were looking from an angle.
Yeah.
And it's super useful. Like if you're writing an embargoed story in Starbucks.
Correct.
You can do that now.
Yeah,
you know
totally.
what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, there are some other features that are coming we can't talk about because they're under embargo, but keep an ear on that device, because I think, honestly, this is the first time that I've been like, oh, this is a business laptop and it doesn't suck? Yeah, sign me up, kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't have any seat time actually using it yet, so you've used it. What are your thoughts on performance, general battery life, all that stuff?
I love it because, well, here's the thing. I've reviewed many Elite books. And Elite books, it's the Elite Book 1000 series is the premium one. And this is more or less a successor to the Elite Book 1030, which is the 13-inch one. So all aluminum. But these things, for the last year or so, have had incredible keyboards.
Oh, you're right. I noticed that when I test typed on it. It was really good.
Yes. And that is, for me, the biggest feature that matters, because I type for a living. And so the fact that they brought that in here, the fact that it's so light, and the fact that it has LTE makes it kind of perfect. Yep. It's easy to bring around. Yeah. The typing experience is great. It's got the performance because it's got a U series processor. It's 8th gen, which is fine. I mean, the thing about business PCs is that they need to wait until Intel has a V Pro version of the chip.
Right.
So it had to be 8th gen. But overall, I love it. It's almost perfect.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, I hope that, if you're just a consumer or a small business owner, you look at these, because it's like if you're deciding, to buy something, you might don't care about all the enterprise, IT configuration features and safe boot and whatever, all that really crazy BIOS, Sure Start, all that stuff. You might not care about that, and that's fine, because you might just care about the other stuff, which is really great, and that really makes it competitive versus consumer laptops, which is really interesting. Does it have the precision trackpad, this one? Because I'm going to have to install the drivers if it does. Oh, good, because HP has been really bad about that in the past.
Well, they've been bad about that with their consumer laptops. Their business laptops have actually had them for a little while.
Oh, that's funny.
It's crazy is the word you're looking for.
I had the Folio, right? The leather-bound laptop from HP last year, and I installed the precision trackpad drivers right away because it was unusable. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is 2019. Like, how can you ship a laptop with such a crappy trackpad? Turns out it's just the drivers. So
it's very frustrating.
Once I did it, it was like gold. It was amazing. Let's switch gears because we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to talk about some phone news. There has been some really interesting phone news this week. I know it's like very close to the holidays, but we don't stop working. You have to understand, if you're listening to this show and you're not familiar, CES is coming up early January. Rich and I and every journalist out there right now, we're like buried in emails. We're getting hundreds of emails a day. We're getting pitches. We're getting devices to try out ahead of CES. We're having to schedule and plan meetings. It's a nightmare. We're super busy. And so it doesn't stop for us, and it doesn't stop for the industry. Like, remember, China does not celebrate Christmas and New Year's, right? I mean, like, they have a different New Year. So the world, we're not just living in a world of, everybody celebrates Christmas and New Year. So some of us don't care, and some of us have to continue working. And I think if you are going to see us, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, you pretty much have to continue working at this point.
I really hate the timing of this show.
It's rough. So a couple of OnePlus bits of news. OnePlus announced in a press release yesterday that they're going to be showing at CES a phone that's a concept phone called the Concept One. We don't know too much about it at this point. I'm certainly looking forward to it. We'll have coverage for you from the show as soon as I can get the coverage. I will have it. I'm super excited about this. OnePlus reached out to me, so stay tuned for that. I mean, do we know much else? Do you have anything to add to that, Rich?
We do not know anything else. Just that it's called the OnePlus Concept One because there will be other concepts in the future.
Right. And it's to celebrate the 6th anniversary of OnePlus. And the other thing that you have to understand is the BBK Group, which owns OnePlus. I mean, I know I'm simplifying here. This is much more complicated. But in general speak, BBK is an umbrella company that has under its umbrella OnePlus, Oppo, and Vivo. And they share technology a lot, these companies. That's why a lot of Oppo phones look like they have similar specs to OnePlus phones, etc. They don't really want you to talk about that much. They get a little, cranky when you bring it up, but it's the reality. And here's the thing. Vivo and Oppo have shown concept phones yearly, at least once a year, for a few years now, and it's really boosted their visibility in the world, created buzz, created media coverage, and gotten the fans excited. How did you remember the first, and I say you, not Rich, but the audience, do you remember the first pop-up camera? That was Vivo. That was 2 years ago. They showed a concept with a pop-up camera. The first under-display fingerprint reader was Vivo as well at CES a few years back. Then there was, right now, Oppo just had a conference in Shenzhen, earlier this month, right after the summit, Qualcomm Snapdragon Summit in Maui, where they showed an under-display front-facing camera. And that's, as we discussed on last week's show, is probably going to come to the Oppo Find X2. So we're going to let you know what's happening, but this might be the first phone with an under-display front-facing camera. So that's like this concept phone thing. They do this, and it's normal for them. And so BBK Group has been doing this with Vivo and Oppo. It only makes sense that OnePlus now, that really has a visible brand in the West, more than even in Asia, would do this. And I'm excited about it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I just have no idea what to expect.
I think it's going to be cool, whatever it is. It's going to show us the direction of the future OnePlus phones. And speaking of the future OnePlus phone, completely in parallel with this announcement, there was a huge leak of all the specs for the OnePlus 8 phones. And I say phones because we've known for a while now that OnePlus has been doing the regular and the Pro. But there's also been talk of a light version of the OnePlus 8. We talked about that last week's show. And sure enough, somebody leaked the OnePlus 8 Lite, OnePlus 8, and OnePlus 8 Pro specs. And so let's see. I've got an article here from Pocket Now, my good friend Jaime Rivera. Actually, this was written by... Who was it written by? Oh, that was written by...
Samuel Martinez.
Yeah, that was written by Samuel Martinez. But so basically... we're looking at, let's start with the Lite. So 6.4-inch OLED, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 or 256 gigs of storage, MediaTek 1000, so that's the Dimensity with the 5G, 4,000 milliamp hour battery, triple camera, 48, 16, and 12. We assume that's ultra wide and telephoto for those last second ones. 30 watt fast charging, IP53 rating. And it would start at $430 US.
That would be their very first phone to not include a Snapdragon 8 series processor.
That is correct, and it's also their play to kind of catch a lower tier again, which is really smart. Yep. Then we'd get a regular OnePlus 8, which is the same 30 watt fast charging, 4,000 milliamp hour, IP53. The IP rating is weird because Samsung never officially announces IP ratings. It would also include NFC, which would be lacking from the original, which tell me the original would only make it to China because they've learned their lesson from the OnePlus 2 when we really bitched at them about not having NFC, not to bring a non-NFC equipped phone to North America because we like our Google Pay. NFC, so it would add NFC support to have a Snapdragon 865, 5G support, triple camera with a 60 megapixel, 16 and 12, and a 32 megapixel selfie, 8 or 12 gigs of RAM, 128 or 256 gigs of storage, and that would start at $472. So wow, we're talking just like $40 more. Like, wow, how price sensitive are people? I mean, no, I get it. Like in the US, people just walk into a carrier store, and if the car falls under $1,000, they don't care because they get a subsidy, and it's like $3 extra a month difference price, monthly price. That's the price of a coffee. They don't care. But this is like insane. Okay, and then the Pro would have a punch hole for selfie camera, like basically like the Samsung Galaxy, like the hole in the display. With a 32 megapixel sensor and a time of flight camera. So it would have it would have 3D Face ID, 6.7 inch display, 120 hertz. That's exciting. Triple camera would be the same as the regular version, but it would have a 10 times hybrid zoom like the Reno 10X did.
That's interesting.
And then the other ones would have a 5x hybrid zoom. So hybrid means the combination of digital and analog zoom or optical zoom. So I'd say like it's probably maybe a 3 or 5x optical plus the hybrid. And then the cheaper ones would have a 2 times or maybe 3 times zoom with the hybrid, bringing it up to 5. And the big device would also have two 2250 milliamp hours for a total of 4500 milliamp hours. And the reason there's 2 is because Oppo has been doing this for a while now. You can charge the 2 cells in parallel simultaneously to get 50 watt super warp charge, which would be the same as super VOOC that Oppo has. By the way, here's a little tip for those of you out there who have multiple phones, maybe like me. The Oppo charger and the OnePlus chargers are compatible. Same company, BBK again. So I was really surprised to find out that you can plug a OnePlus charger into an Oppo phone and charge it super fast, and vice versa. So consider that. And then we're looking at 8 gig 128 for $645, so much higher. 8 gigs 256 for $716, and 12 gig 512. This will be the McLaren edition. I'm making that up. That's not in the leak. It would be the $788. And as an aside, Rich, I know you have the OnePlus 7T Pro 5G McLaren for T-Mobile in your pocket like I do. We talked about it so extensively last week that I don't want to talk about it now. And so I will just not mention it. But you should listen to last week's podcast if you want our thoughts on that. I've really been enjoying the coverage and the network and everything else about it. So just keep an eye on that, folks. Keep an eye on that. Right? Right.
Nothing about wireless charging in these leaks then.
Well, apparently not. And it's interesting because some Oppo and Vivo phones have had it in the past. So I'm not sure what's going on. But this is typical. Like I think OnePlus has been very clear that they feel that fast wire charging is the way to go and that they wouldn't adopt wireless charging until they can at least deliver 30 watt. And Xiaomi and Huawei are close to 30 watt or are at 30 watt. So I think as soon as maybe somebody manages to make 40 watt wireless charging happen, I think we're going to see OnePlus at it because that's what they want. They want basically a way for you to fast charge no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I still want wireless charging in a device. I mean, the way that I charge a device is that during the day it sits on a wireless charging pad.
I'm the same with you. Like I switched from my Google Pixel 4 to the OnePlus since I'm a T-Mobile customer, and I'm in a 5G market here in Portland. In SF, I don't have it. But yeah, by the way, if you are in the Bay Area, hint, 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 folks, the network's not supposedly existent. It doesn't exist supposedly, but large parts of Oakland have 5G active and working like a charm right now in low band. If you have a OnePlus 7T Pro 5G McLaren edition in the Bay Area, you will get 5G in some parts. So just be aware of that. Anyway, I didn't want to talk about that phone. God damn it. Sorry, it's okay. Go to last episode, 141, and listen to all the stuff we had to say. All right. And also the previous episode before that at Qualcomm Snapdragon Summit, I had Alex Katuzian for the Snapdragon 7C, 8C, 8CX, but I also had our good friend Gadgets Boy, YouTube creator, on, and we talked about the OnePlus and our first experience with it. So you should listen to that. All right, this is interesting. the UK plans to ban locked phones, meaning that if
as we should all.
Exactly, right? So meaning that the UK is about to pass a law that is going to force carriers and manufacturers to only sell unlocked phones. So, like, I mean, of course you want that, and I hate the government having to come in to do this, but I'm going to say yes to this. This is, I really, really wish we had this in the US. It'd be so great.
Exactly. What real advantage is there to a carrier to sell a locked phone?
Well, it locks people in. That's why they do it. And locks them into a payment plan. That's why people do it. They can't switch. So I understand
but you're already on a payment plan. They can still force you to pay off your device. That's why we have things like bill collectors and stuff. If you just try to run away with the phone.
Exactly.
So there's no reason other than just to kind of screw you.
Exactly. And then the other thing is, I think there's a new reason that's becoming more and more important. And I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes, but look, climate change is real. It's happening. If you don't believe in it, get off my podcast and unsubscribe, okay? But here's the thing. All these phones out there that are in, recycling facilities and dumpsters or in drawers at people's houses that are locked, that can't be used by these people or it can only be used on a certain network. It's BS.
That's a great point.
Right? It's really hindering recycling. You're going to say, it's really easy. You just put an unlock code in. Have you tried putting an unlock code in? There's a lot of unlockers, including our good friend David Kogan, who runs an unlocking business, that cannot unlock a lot of the carrier phones in the US, at least initially. And then these phones end up basically unused and unusable and not recyclable easily because of being locked. So I say there's an environmental aspect to this as well.
That's a really great point.
Now, for somebody who changes phones every 6 months, it's maybe a little bit hypocritical for me to say that. I should probably hang on to my devices a little longer. But the reality is, as a tech journalist, I have to stay on top of it, right? So
it is our job.
It's our job. But this is good news. I'm excited about it. I'm glad you're excited. If you're not excited, I think that even if you don't believe in climate change, first of all, again, get off my podcast. But if you do, you probably still want unlocked phones because you're a phone person. So I think you're going to be happy by this. Windows Phone is going away. Oh, actually, Windows Phone is back. So now it's a zombie, right? Basically.
They killed it and they brought it back. Okay. And there's no actual reason why they brought it back.
Rich, tell us all. Tell the story.
Okay, so Windows 10 Mobile end of support was last Tuesday. I believe it was December 10th. And then on, I believe, Sunday, they just kind of updated the support page to say that it's now ending on January 14th, 2020. So the date, by the way, that original December 10th date, that's been set in stone for years. Every time there's a new version of any operating system from Microsoft, they have the end of life date. You can look it up. So that wasn't new. And I have no idea why they brought it back for a month. Do you want to take a guess?
News coverage?
I thought maybe they're going for dumbest story of the decade. I don't know, but all I could think was maybe there was some business that bought into Windows 10 Mobile that was just like, hey, we need one more month to migrate. That's all I could think of.
I don't know. I think it's interesting. I want to say a little eulogy though, because I feel like Windows Phone had so much delight to it. Like, I really enjoyed that platform. The user experience was so strong and great. And, it's really sad that it never got the traction. And I knew it was doomed from pretty much the moment that Google decided they weren't going to play ball, because this is it. This is where you lose, right?
Is that why you think that it failed?
I totally think that we're seeing Google? This. I think we're probably seeing the same thing as we're seeing with Chrome not coming as a 64-bit version for Windows 10 right now. It's I don't think Google is inherently evil, but I feel that Google in the last few years has kind of gotten more like, traditional in its business approach by being a little bit more cutthroat. And that's what we're seeing we saw with Windows Phone back in the day. They were adamant. Like, they were just like, they didn't want Windows. They didn't want Microsoft to have a leg to stand on. And remember, this is the Ballmer days too, right? I think if Satya Nadella had come along earlier, and I think
they would have killed it earlier.
I think they would have. Well, just the cynic in you, the cynic in me, I should say, could agree with you there. But I think that
Ballmer was into devices. Satya Nadella's always been more about.
That's exactly why I think that Google probably would have been more chill about it. You know what I'm saying? They would have been like, oh, okay, well, by the time Satya came along, those Google didn't care. Windows Phone was dead already. They'd already killed it pretty much. And I'm not saying Google's the only one who killed it. There's a lot of people who killed Windows Phone, like Microsoft being number one. I
blame Microsoft. Yes. Listen, this was a company that put the PC first and always did. Mobile was always a second-class citizen to Microsoft.
Absolutely.
In a world where Apple and Google were willing to make mobile a first-class citizen, and you just can't win that way.
No,
that's
world
how I look at it.
Where Microsoft. Sorry, I don't know. That sounded like the title of a good movie, like the beginning of one of those trailers. But look, I had a lot of respect for Windows Phone. I would have liked it to be a viable third player, but that was not the reality we lived in, and I think Microsoft was a big part of it. I think honestly the Nokia acquisition and the whole debacle around that was a big part of it, and I also think that Google had a big part to play, because for me, as at the time, the reason I really had a struggle using Windows Phone versus iOS or Android was I couldn't seamlessly use my Google services very well.
Yeah.
And there were workarounds, but it was always a hassle. And so, and the lack of things like Instagram becoming really late and others it was just never there. And so I shed a tear for the awesome creativity behind the experience and some of the great memories of lovely Nokia phones I had for a while and some others, some Samsung and HTC phones as well. I would have loved to see a Surface phone, but...
Well, now we have a Surface phone, though.
Yeah, we kind of do, but it's not the same, Rich. It's coming, I know.
No, not at all. No.
But Windows Phone shed a tear, but I'm kind of excited that it's coming back as a zombie, because they killed it on the 10th, then they resuscitated, and now it's back for a month. So
it's like just a mess
with
us.
So here's what I'm going to say to you listeners. Please be cautious this holiday season. Of course, keep an eye out for drunk drivers and all the usual stuff you have to be cautious about, because people are stupid during the holidays. They get stressed but big caveat, be super cautious this year, because you're going to find zombies, Windows Phone zombies out there. All right? So I just want you to know to be careful out there on this holiday season because of the zombies. All right? Yeah, so that's it. I mean, did you have any last words about Windows Phone? Like, were you a fan? Did you have regrets? Are you sad?
I mean, I got my start reviewing Windows phones because Nokia had a very, very strong community, and I kind of fell in with that, and I got really into it, and I kind of watched as Microsoft let it all fall apart.
Yeah, I can relate.
Nokia also kind of took over that market in such a way that there was no incentive for other vendors to really come in there and make a great device, and I thought that hurt the ecosystem.
That totally hurt the ecosystem, yeah, because look at how well Android and is done with that, and even how Microsoft Windows PCs have done with that, despite the Surface ecosystem, right? So it could have happened. It could have been simultaneous. My big thing was you touched on something I thought was really interesting, is that I got my start through Nokia as well. Like I was basically in 2005, 2006, a budding blogger, and they had a program at the time called Word of Mouth World, WOM World. And if you were like a budding blogger, you could email them and say, "Hey, I'm starting. Here's my URL and my YouTube channel. This is actually before YouTube. Here's my where you can find my content." And if they checked you out and if they approved you, they'd send you devices. And that's what got me started. Like, I got Steve Litchfield in the UK, who is a long-time journalist and blogger and phone guy, got me hooked up. He said, "Here, talk to these people," and I did. And they said, "Here, I have a phone," and I started reviewing the N series. And it's the same with you, I guess, but later on with the Lumia program, right? So,
well, did that program that you were talking about turn into Nokia Connects?
Correct. Yeah, point? Basically, I think so.
So that's
eventually
the exact same thing.
Yeah. So my point is, what I'm saying is that, like, I want the companies that are out there to understand that you can't just seed your devices and whatever to, like, the big guys. You should really look out to the up and coming content creators, whether they're on, whatever platform it is, TikTok now, whatever. What about these kids today, Rich? I don't know what they're doing. Get off my lawn, But I mean, like, seriously, like, I think that we need to give everybody a chance. And I could not have had a chance to become a tech journalist, an accomplished one, like end up working at Engadget and all that, if I hadn't had that seed initially of Nokia believing in me and giving me devices, because it's really hard. I was actually going to carrier stores back then in 2005, 2006, and buying the phones and returning them within 10 days. In California, we had a law that they couldn't charge restocking fees. You actually had to get your entire money back. Oh. So I'd spend like the first day unboxing and I could use the phone extensively for 2 or 3 days and then I'd bring it back, But it wasn't sustainable, right? Like, how it's impossible to do that long term. So I'm glad I finally got the hookup. Yeah. So that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the show, folks, really. Rich, do you want to tell people where they can find you on the internets?
Well, they can always find me on Neowin. I write a ridiculous amount of content all the time. And then, of course, on Twitter is probably the best place to just find me doing my thing. It's at the Rich Woods. And I also tweet all the time.
You do tweet a lot.
I enjoy Twitter. I just control the people that I follow.
Yeah. No, I wish I had a bit more time to tweet. I'm an occasional tweeter. I would suggest you look at my Twitter feed, but I don't think I tweet as much as you or David Roddock, for example. But yeah, you know where to find me on Twitter, folks. I'm at Tank Girl. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character, but without the vowels, like Tank Girl. And on Instagram, that's the same handle, at Tank Girl, TNKGRL. So Twitter is where you want to connect with me about this podcast. If you have comments, ideas, thoughts, you want to run something by me, argue with me, whatever, Twitter. And then if you want to watch pretty pictures of phones and taken with phones, that's Instagram. And you can argue with me about pictures there if you want. Don't argue with me, okay? And then and then there is, of course, the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Myriam Jouar. That's where the URL is. Myriam Jouar is my full name. If you don't know how to spell that, go to my Twitter account. You'll find it. It's a channel with a complimentary content, so extra stuff for the podcast. So you get like unboxings, hands-ons, that kind of stuff. So check it out. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos, all that good stuff. Tell your friends. Help me grow the channel. And the podcast, if you just stumbled on this and you enjoyed it, we do this weekly. I have a guest weekly, usually a media guest, and we are on mobiletechpodcast.com. That's the URL. If you want to subscribe, there's an old school RSS feed there, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go to Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Pocket Casts, Overcast, Spotify even, and type in Mobile Tech Podcast, Tank Girl, and you'll find it. Please do me a favor, rate the show, basically write a review or whatever. If your platform allows you to do that, please do it. It helps a lot. The other thing that helps is sponsors, and we have a really great sponsor on the show. Been with us for a long time. It's audible.com, the audiobook people. Yes, if you love books as much as I do, you really ought to give yourself the opportunity to listen to some books in addition to reading them. Maybe you're doing a road trip or something and you want to have some fun stuff to do while you're driving. That's what Audible is all about. So check out Audible if you want a deal and you want to support the podcast. We have a 30-day free trial. But the nice thing about it is you get to keep a book at the end and you support the podcast, even if you decide to not stay. So check it out. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech, the URL. So that's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And I'll have it in the show notes below and on your RSS feed. It'll be there as well. So check it out. Please support the podcast. Click through if you're not already audible.com user, because it'll help even if you don't stay with the platform. But of course, try to stay. It's fun. It's not expensive and you get tons of really great books. If you drive a lot, this is really a no-brainer. So that's it, folks. Rich, thanks again for being on the show. You rock.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, of course. This is also such a perfect timing with this Surface Pro X and the HP stuff. So again, thanks for being on the show. I'll have you again. And folks, there'll be another show next week. I'm not stopping even for the holidays, so stay tuned. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.